This is The Inner Edge. I'm Ephraim Simchayev, licensed occupational therapist, curious mind, and your host. Each week, I sit down with bold thinkers in therapy, health, and business to break down what really moves the needle. No fluff, just real stories, smart insights, and the edge you need. Every so often, we get a guest who brings not just expertise, but heart, wisdom, and real passion for making a difference. Today's guest is exactly that person. I am so excited to welcome Robin Akselrud to the show, a brilliant occupational therapist, a business owner, an educator, and a director. Someone who truly believes in the power of supporting every child and client's unique journey. Her dedication to empowering children, adolescents, and adults, as well as students. Her leadership in our field is inspiring, to say the least. Today, she's here to share her insights, her story, and her passion for helping others thrive. Robin, welcome to the podcast. We're so excited to have you. So today on The Inner Edge, I am joined by someone whose work speaks louder than words, Robin Akselrud. She's a powerhouse in the world of occupational therapy, a mentor, a trailblazer, and a voice in a noisy space. Her journey, her passion, and her impact have touched so many lives. And she's here to share it with all of us today. So, Robin, thank you so much for coming out here.
Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, pleasure. So, let's dive right in. Can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up, and what inspired you to become an occupational therapist?
Okay, so first of all, occupational therapy is the best profession. So if you haven't heard about it or you're not familiar with it, it's something to look into. But I didn't know about occupational therapy, as many do not know about it. I grew up in Brooklyn, went to typical schools, and actually at a career fair in high school, they had a panel of therapists professionals that came and spoke. One of them was a recreational therapist, not even an occupational therapist, and she was sharing what she does as a recreational therapist, and it interested me. I definitely liked working with people, with children, with adults. It seemed fun, it seemed exciting, gratifying. And then, I went to seminary, came back, and thought I wanted to be a physical therapist, actually.
Wow.
Part of schooling, part of the application process to get into an OT program or any physical therapy program is volunteering. So I did volunteer hours, and through the volunteer hours, I saw what the PTs did, and I saw what the OTs did, and I loved what the OTs did. And that sort of changed my path. I decided that I wasn't going to do physical therapy. I was going to do occupational therapy. And here I am today. I'm grateful for that experience. I think that occupational therapy was definitely the best choice for me. Physical therapy, we work great with the PTs, but I align more with the OT profession. So I'm glad that I chose that, and here I am
amazing.
today.
Wow. I can relate to you. I've actually spoken about this recently with Frida Fleischman. I was telling her how when I started out, I volunteered in different settings of therapy, and I saw PT, OT, speech, and OT spoke to me as well. Yeah. I felt like it was more versatile, and you can work in so many different broad settings. So it actually, you've navigated many roles throughout the years of working as a clinician, as a mentor, as a director. I recall years back you had your own practice, Forward OT.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was an amazing place. Can you talk a little bit about that? How you started the business, and perhaps what you addressed, whether working with children or adults or both?
Okay, great. So I will start at the beginning. I received a Department of Education scholarship when I was in Truro. Actually, I'm a Truro grad myself. And I worked in the schools for about 10 years, in the public school system for about 10 years. I also was doing early intervention. I was doing adult home care, And I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. After about 9+ years, I felt like I wanted to change. I wanted to change. I wanted to be challenged more. I was looking for something different and exciting. And I had this thought, let me open a private practice, right? There weren't a lot of OTs doing that at the time. It was something new. There were a lot of physical therapists that had practices, but OT was, definitely less. I decided. I was at a home care visit with another therapist, actually a PT, and we were talking about private practice, and he was opening his practice, and I said, do you want a partner?
Wow.
I don't know how those words came out of my mouth even, but I guess I was ready, and it was the right time. We ended up looking at locations and spaces, and then ordering equipment and renovations and onboarding with insurance companies and marketing and all of those things. I ended up leaving the school system at that time, and I went full force private practice. And it was a very exciting, stressful time in my life because I was marketing and managing and treating and all the things,
Wow.
And it was great. We took private insurance for adults and children, which was something that was needed in the community. There weren't a lot of providers that accepted private insurance, and that was great until insurance cut their reimbursement rates, and that sort of changed things. But I had about 9 therapists, 9 OTs that were working for me.
Wow.
We had 3 practice sites. It was very, very exciting, busy, fun. It was definitely a learning experience for me. If you're considering opening a private practice, I could definitely speak to me first, get a mentor, speak to others that have done it. But I don't do that anymore. I sort of pivoted into academia after those insurance changes happened.
Wow.
So,
can you share some stories, perhaps, what you've learned in the process of partnering up with a physical therapist, getting your LLC, I suppose, and then, renovating, buying equipment. I mean, that whole process itself must have, like you said, stressful, exciting at the same time. How many years did you do it?
So it was a process. So, onboarding with insurance companies, you could either do it yourself or you could hire someone. I did it myself. So it took longer. But again, a learning experience. I can share with others what that process looked like because I did it myself. Finding a space was not so easy, right? You say location, location, location. You really want to find the best location, the most affordable location. Buying equipment. Are you buying new equipment? Are you buying secondhand equipment? We, went to look at better secondhand equipment for some items that were super pricey. But again, some stuff we had to buy that was new. My husband is a techie. He did all the wiring in the office, so that was helpful. I have brothers that are printers. They did some marketing for me. I wrote weekly in magazines that are published in the community for free, and that was like free advertising. So sort of have to figure out what could work for you. You have to make sure that you're passionate about it because it is a lot of work, and you definitely have setbacks and failures, and you learn from your mistakes. But also having a mentor, speaking to others that have done it, speaking to others in the field, looking at your competition, seeing what's out there, seeing if there's really a need, in that specific area, in that specific location, and what the need actually is. How are you going to be different than others is really important. And one piece of advice that I should have used, but I didn't really use, was start small. So when I opened, we went from 1 location to 3 locations. It was great. It was busy, but someone gave me a piece of advice and said, start small. Start small and grow. So I would give that advice to someone else. Start small. It may be quiet. It may be slow, but then build from there. See what works. See what doesn't work. Perfect it, and then grow and build.
I love that.
So.
A lot of people jump right in and they start a couple of practices, or they expand too fast. I love it. So that goes back to the next question. So how did you pivot from private practice, working for the school system, and then you went into the academia realm to become the program director of an all-women's occupational therapy program?
So it's an occupational therapy section, all-women's section of the occupational therapy program at Touro University. So what happened was occupational therapy students complete internships called fieldwork experiences, and every student has to have those fieldwork experiences to graduate. So you need professionals in the field to supervise students so that they get that opportunity and they can do the internships. You need like a supervisor in the field called fieldwork supervisor. So I was a fieldwork supervisor for years. I worked in the school system, I worked in private practice, and students would come to me for 12 weeks at a time and I would supervise them. I think you came to one of my facilities at one point.
Yes, I did. That was great.
So after reflecting on those experiences, I really enjoyed teaching. I wasn't formally teaching, but I was teaching students in the field, and I enjoyed it. Another program reached out to me, a professor reached out to me and said, like, would you consider teaching? And I was like, teaching? Like, that was not on my radar at all. I would have never considered that. And I thought about it, and I'm like, okay, what's available? Like, what could I teach? And I started with one course. I really liked it. It was fun. It was interesting. I could share my experiences with students. Students are thirsty for knowledge and for stories and for real life experiences. And I had that to share. So I taught as an adjunct for about a year. And what happens is that you can't become a full-time professor unless you have your doctorate. So I decided at that point either I was going to teach full-time and get my doctorate, or I was going to stay as an adjunct. And I decided to go full force.
Full force, yes.
I just literally, like, over a course of a month, I researched into doctoral programs. I applied, I started, and that was a good shift for me. I enjoy teaching. I enjoy mentoring students. And that's where I sort of pivoted. So through those experiences of supervising students in the field, I then became an adjunct, and then now a full-time professor, program director.
That's incredible. I find our profession is so amazing because we part of treatment and part of mentoring, education is really at the forefront. Educating clients, the children, teaching. So you took that to a whole new level, and you became a professor and director, and it's amazing. Can you talk a little bit about the book? I believe it was the Quintessential Occupational Therapy book?
Yeah, so that's a story in itself. So part of being a professor is producing scholarship and writing and doing research, and nobody, people don't mention that. They think of professor as teaching, but there's that side piece, that scholarship piece that is very important as a professor. So publishing, doing research. And I would say that I'm a non-conventional professor. I like to be creative, I like to be innovative, and I was working at Hofstra University at the time. I have like about an hour drive every day back and forth, and I would listen to podcasts, and I would think about all things as I was driving. And on the way to work one day, I was thinking about an idea for a book. So it would be a planner. It's called the My OT Journey Planner, and that was my first idea that I had. I wasn't sure how to navigate that whole situation. How do you publish a book? What's the process? Would people want to buy it? Would there be a need? And I remember coming into work that day and telling my colleagues about it, and they were like, "It's such a good idea. You should definitely do it." And that's really, having supportive colleagues, super important. And I was like, okay, now what? How do I get this done? So what I did was I contacted multiple publishing companies, and the way that it goes is that you share your idea, you submit a proposal, and either they contact you back and have a discussion or further discussion with you, or they don't respond, and that just means they're not interested. So I actually got a call back from Slack Publishing, and I was like, whoa, like, is this for real? Like, I was super surprised. But they liked the idea. It was different. It was innovative. It was a planner for OT students. And we signed a contract. And we were ready to go full force. I would sit down on my computer and just write and write and write because I was passionate about it. But, if you're not passionate about something, it's very hard to write.
Absolutely.
COVID happened, and publishing sort of stopped for all textbooks. Things became online. Publishing companies sort of halted new contracts or put like later deadlines, postponed contracts. And Slack contacted me after about 6 months into the pandemic, and they basically said, "We love your idea. It's very innovative. Right now we're only doing basic textbooks, and we're gonna either put a hold on it or cancel it."
Wow.
And I was really upset at the
Yeah.
time. It was already a finished product at that time. It was ready to go into production. I was working on it for almost 2 years at that time when I got that news. But Slack was very supportive, and they pushed me to self-publish, which was another whole process.
Oh my goodness.
So I didn't know how to self-publish. I spoke to others who had self-published. They weren't super positive about the experience. And I just decided, like, I put so much work into this, I'm going to try and self-publish. Even if nobody buys that book, I am still going to try and self-publish,
Wow.
which is what I did. I self-published the planner. I hired a designer. I hired a printer. I went to the printing facilities. I actually watched over the printing, made sure that it was made correctly,
Wow.
fixed some errors, and then those planners were printed. I then sold the planners on my own. So I would take the planners from the printer to my house, box them up, ship them out.
That's amazing.
You know, basic stuff, you know, one shop in my house during COVID. So we published a first edition of the planner, and there was a lot of interest in the planner from universities and from students. So we changed it a little, and there was a second edition. Again, self-published.
Wow.
I received a few grants from CUNY actually for students. So the students would get planners for free through a grant, and that happened for a couple of years. Actually, about a month ago, I found out that they're actually doing research on my planner, like research with students to show how it improves their mental health and their functional level in school. So it's super exciting for me to be part of that.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So that was the OT Journey Planner. And then once I was, you know, comfortable with that, I had this other idea for a textbook, and again, driving to work. And that book was actually published by Slack after the pandemic. It's called Quintessential Occupational Therapy. And what I did for that text is I teamed together professionals and experts from different areas of OT practice throughout the US. So we had an early intervention team made up of therapists from different states. We had a hand therapy team. We had a acute care, a subacute care, different teams of therapists that had expertise in different areas of practice. They came together and they wrote chapters on what it would be like or what it would look like to work in that area of practice. So as OTs, one of the things that I love about the profession is that there are so many different opportunities, so many areas that you can go into as an OT. And therapists and clinicians and new grads are just sort of unsure of what that would look like. So this paints a picture of what it would look like in that if you decided, you know, tomorrow you wanted to work in early intervention, or next week you wanted to work in a hospital-based setting. Those teams of therapists showed, you know, sample notes, sample evaluations, sample schedule, what types of diagnoses you would treat, what your schedule would look like, what personalities would work best in different areas, so that students or clinicians can read those chapters and say, hey, I like this, or no, this is not my thing. And you know, they don't have to go into the field, get a job, and then realize that. They could just read the textbook and see, this is what it will look like typically. I think this is for me, or this is definitely not for me.
That's brilliant.
So,
Brilliant. Wow.
Yeah. So.
You know, a lot of people that are watching could be students perhaps that are unsure of where to find mentors or how to navigate in that realm. How would you recommend? Did you have mentors? If you did, who were they and how did they shape you as a therapist?
So these are one of the, you know, things that you learn, right? One of the areas that you work on improving are things that you're lacking. And having a mentor was something that I never had starting out. I got my bachelor's, master's, didn't have a mentor, worked in practice for years, did not have a mentor. I started out in mentorship after I got my doctorate. So during that doctoral experience, I went back to school. It was a huge learning curve for me. You know, when I went to school initially, we had like papers and pencils and like maybe a laptop, but like now everything was virtual. There was Blackboard and discussion boards, and everyone had a laptop. It was totally different. And I felt like I needed a mentor because I wasn't used to that space. I didn't know how to navigate effectively. And one of my professors, who I'm very grateful for, unofficially mentored me. She supervised me as a student.
Wow.
But we're still in touch, and she is my mentor. Whenever I have a question about, career choices, opportunities that come up, decisions, I contact her, and she's there for me, which is very, very special. She's someone that is very esteemed, does a lot of research, a lot of publishing, has been a program director, has been a professor for years. So my advice to those starting out is to definitely get a mentor. And I have students now that reach out to me even after they graduate. They're not sure how to navigate the field, choices to make. They'll contact me and they'll ask me to be their mentor. And
wow.
That is super important, like super important. That would be like my top piece of advice, is to get a mentor. How do you choose a mentor, right?
Yes.
There are so many people out there. Choose someone that you respect. Choose someone whose career looks like what you want your career to look like in 10 years from now. Choose someone that has time to give you, that's generous with their time, that's understanding, and that really cares for you. Those are the people that you want to be as mentors.
Wow.
There are people that you can look up to and could be role models, but they don't have the time or the energy for you. Make sure the person has the energy, the time, someone that's honest with you, and someone that really cares for you specifically.
Wow.
So that would be a huge tool for someone going into the field that would make a huge difference in your career trajectory.
I could definitely see that. I appreciate that. When I graduated occupational therapy, what I found was I didn't have a lot of mentors, unfortunately. So now I feel like there's a lot more people available. What would you say in terms of students that are going into school now with AI kind of taking on, and really there's so many breakthroughs happening? Do you find that our profession is going to be impacted, or do you find that a lot of people are nervous to lose their jobs and be replaced by AI? Do you find that AI would replace our jobs indefinitely, or do you feel that our profession is really timeless and AI could probably enhance it but not take over?
So that's a great question, especially as an educator. We see assignments, and AI is just easy and accessible, and it can assist so many students. That's part of the process, is going through the educational system with AI and not using it in the wrong way. And then also, as a profession, our profession is not going to be touched by AI. There's a huge need for occupational therapists in the field, and there will continue to be a huge need for occupational therapists in the field. However, AI can definitely enhance our treatments. They can definitely revamp a lot of things that need revamping. They can assist, but it will not replace. Quality healthcare can't be replaced. Occupational therapy, tailor-made to each person individually, client-centered, occupation-based, cannot be replaced by AI. But we can use it as a tool, just like we have a toolbox of so many other skills. We can use it as a tool to assist us in implementing new programs, in developing new opportunities, in innovating. We can definitely use it. We have to make sure that we're using it in the right way. AI can also make a lot of errors,
yes,
and we don't want that for our patients. We want to make sure that everyone's safe and doing the correct exercises with the proper body mechanics, and all of those fine-tuning small things that we need to look at. That, again, it could be used in a proper way, but it will not replace healthcare.
Profession, right?
Yeah.
Can you share perhaps, some success stories of clients you've treated in the geriatric or pediatric world that you carry with you? You can recall these stories of people you've really made a difference in their lives.
So I always say I could write a book about stories, but I'll think about one or two that are most impactful that I could think of right now. So years ago, I was treating an adult. He was 30 years old, and he had a stroke suddenly. He had 4 children. He was married. He had a job. He went from being a functional father, husband, all of those things, to being totally dependent, not being able to use half of his body, not being able to speak, not being able to work. His cognition was affected, and it was traumatic. It was a traumatic experience for him and for his family.
Wow.
Worked with him for a while. He made significant gains, but he still had a long way to go. And I felt that he could be integrated back into his job or into some modified version of his job. And that would help him with his mental health, with his physical health, just getting back into functional roles, coming home and getting a salary, working, assisting at home with his kids. When you're a patient, you're in that patient mindset. It's very hard to get out of that patient mindset. And I sort of coached him. I gave him a few tasks. I assessed, his cognition, his functional level, just to see what opportunities, job opportunities would be available to him with his current skills. He shared that he was working in a warehouse, he was managing a warehouse, and what types of skills you needed to do that. So we spoke about modifying that job so he can go back to work with less mobility, with slightly less physical needs, and doing a lot virtually on his laptop, overseeing others, supervising others from afar. And he listened to me. He actually went back to work. Everyone else thought that my idea was really, out of the box, not the right choice for him at the time. And it was. It forced him back into regular real life. Once he went back to work, he realized, hey, I can do so much that I'm not doing at home. Or I can be functional. I can bathe my children even with one hand. I can bathe, I can help out my wife. I can do so many different things. Now I see him actually, he is, I'd say 99% back to himself. He sees me on the street, he waves, it's a great feeling to see, he's had more children since that time. He has a really good marriage. He's working, he's a functional adult, almost back to where he was before the stroke. So making those small suggestions that could be out of the box that other may think as being unconventional can make a huge change. For me, trusting my ideas, trusting my decisions, trusting my thoughts about specific situations is something that I'm constantly working on. But when I see the successes, it makes me feel like I'm doing the right thing.
You are.
It makes me believe in my own self. So that's
beautiful.
Really exciting. And one other story that was an adult story, a pediatric story. Years ago, I did home care for an agency, and I worked with babies with burns. So I used to go to homes after babies had burns on their hands, and I used to massage and stretch them and splint them. And it was a hard experience, but a gratifying experience because, babies are really young, and if they get injured at that point, you can really make so much progress with them by getting therapy early. So I remember I was, walking in Borough Park one day, and I didn't even recognize a family, but the mother came over to me and she said, "Oh, Robin, don't you remember us?" And I was like, "Okay." And she showed me her child's hand, and I was like, "Okay, like what?" He had a significant burn as a baby. She was always nervous that he wouldn't be able to write or color, and she's like, he's writing perfectly. Like his hand is totally healed. You cannot even tell that there's something that happened there. And that was also super exciting and gratifying for me, and that's why I love what I do.
That's amazing. These beautiful stories. Thank you for sharing those. What do you find is the future of our field? Where is our field going? Where do you think, looking ahead, what trends or changes you think are going to happen? I think we've just hit the mark of 100 years old.
Yeah.
And what do you think? What are you foreseeing in terms of how practitioners are adapting and how they can thrive?
So it's exciting, right? We start, like when I went to school, they either did like physical disabilities, pediatrics, maybe hand therapy, and geriatrics. And that was really that was it. Those were the conventional roles of occupational therapists, and that's just what we did. Now it's exciting because OT is innovating, and they're coming up with emerging practice areas and new areas of practice. And people are understanding the greater impact that we can do as OTs. We can do everything and anything. We can do pelvic health. We can do, maternal health. We can do all these different areas that no one would have thought about years ago. But because we're OTs and we're, client-centered, and we have the background in mental health and physical health, both combined, and we're creative and we're innovative, we are change makers in the world. We are change makers in the community, globally. We can make so much change. We can be of so much benefit. And it's exciting to see that happen. It's exciting for others outside of our profession valuing our service, seeing our change and our impact, and allowing us to sort of step into different areas and to grow and to build. So our profession is booming, booming in the need, booming in different areas of emerging practice, using technology to just, create things that have never been, created before. And it's a super exciting time for our profession, and we'll continue to grow and build and develop. And I can't wait to see, the next 10 years and what they look like for OT.
One more question came up. In terms of the financial aspect of OT, I knew a few people. One was a real estate agent, one was a lawyer. Later in life, decided to switch that off and go back to school to become OTs. The lawyer felt like it was more meaningful to do occupational therapy, and he mentioned to me, you've been doing this for almost 10 years now. He said to me, how do you combine the meaningful aspect of treating and also the business aspect? Would you have any recommendations? A lot of therapists feel like the rates. Do you feel like the rates the last 30 years have changed? A lot of people have mentioned to me, like people, I've had meetings with OTs that have just graduated, and they said, we graduated, we wanted to make a good parnasa while also helping and making a difference in somebody's life, and they feel like that's shifted a little bit. Maybe insurance is cut back a little, maybe the rates, went back to the original rates.
So rates have definitely fluctuated over the years. I worked in early intervention, and about 15 years ago there was a huge change in EI, and they cut over time. I'm saying they definitely have cut over time, for sure. However, as OTs, one thing that we are blessed with is that you can hustle. You can work as much or as little as you want. You can have a flexible schedule. You can have a full schedule or a very light schedule. So it's really up to the person themselves how much they want to work and what they want to do. If you work in school-based practice, you may get a certain rate. If you work in home care, you may get a different rate. If you do private pay, that may be a different rate. Everyone has to see what works for them. But what I try to tell students, and I know it's hard to understand, is do what you love. Like, don't look at the dollars behind it. $1 here, $1 there. If you're unhappy in your job and you hate going to work every day, it's not worth it.
Wow.
Do what you like. Do what you love. And if you don't love it, then leave and go into a different area of practice, which we can do, that you do love. And if there isn't an area that speaks to you, create a new area. Create your own practice. Create your own career path. Think about how you can evolve as a person, as a clinician, and what truly aligns with who you want to be and what you love. I think that's the most important part. Students graduate, they look at what's the most high-paying job. That's not the best way to navigate things. You have to, especially as a new grad, see what you like, learn through experience, see what you don't like, and then make a decision about how you want to go about your career and your career path.
Wow, I think that's beautiful. I think it makes a lot of sense. What was that quote? If you do something you love and you're passionate about, you don't feel like you're working.
Right, yeah.
So it makes sense, totally. The other question that came up was, there's so many different courses you can take after you graduate. You have to constantly keep up with, the different trends. Mm-hmm. Do you find, from your experience, that somebody who is taking a niche, a specialty, versus somebody who takes a lot of courses does better, or vice versa? Or have you had different experiences with that?
So I feel like in fields that are flooded, or there's too many therapists in those areas, yes, it's important to find a niche. We, as OTs, we are in demand, so we're not flooded. However, I think that if an area of practice speaks to you and you love that area of practice, go into that niche area. Build your career around that area specifically. I know for me, I love early intervention. I've worked in early intervention for years. It's something that I wouldn't give up. I just love it. Whether they cut the rates or they don't cut the rates, it's something that I enjoy. I think that's important, that you think about what you love, what speaks to you, where your passion is, and if it's, learning about a lot of different things or narrowing it down and just focusing on one, I personally think keeping it narrow is important, but again, some people like to learn about different areas, so that speaks to them. We're definitely in demand, so it's not like a need to specialize specifically, but I would say that it's a good thing. And if you really like something, specialize in it. Go full force, and focus on that specifically.
That makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to research, how do you find, because when I was in school, I remember everything had to be evidence-based practice. Has that changed?
So you listen. That was really good. I say that all the time, and I find like it's something that we ingrain in our students, but they don't always understand it, and it's sort of like they keep it in the back of their head, but not in everyday practice. So yes, to keep our profession strong, we need to show evidence behind what we're doing. We need to show that what we're doing is effective, and there's progress, and there's changes that are happening. So the research is really important. I always tell my students, don't be robots. Some people go into the field, they watch other therapists, and they just copy what others do.
Yes.
Have your own ideas, have your own thoughts, read journals, look at research, current research, and see, is this modality, is this treatment approach research-based, right? There's so many different research articles out there that you can read that come out, but also there are so many different models, so many different methods, right? If you look at the magazines, everyone's trying to open their own practice, this, that, the other, and the students ask me, do you think this works? Well, I'll say, is there research behind it? Go look and see. Is there research? Is it research-based? Is it research-backed? How much research has been done? Is it a small research study? Is it many research studies? And that should guide your practice, because if we're doing treatments that are research-based, they're going to be effective because they've been shown to be effective in research. And if you're just using modalities or treatment strategies that are not research-based, then how do you know that it's going to work? You don't. You can conduct research and see if it's going to work, but how many of us actually do that? Professors do, but in the field, I support and I promote research-based done by clinicians, but many clinicians don't have time or energy or understanding of how to do that research. So if you're in the field and you're trying something new, you're developing something new, team up with someone that is doing research, and maybe they'll do research into your strategy to see if it works, because then you'll know it's going to be effective. So yes, doing research-based practice, evidence-based practice is so important, so that we know what we're doing is going to be effective, and it's not just word of mouth of this worked or this didn't work.
Beautiful. Can you talk a little bit about the being a program director and the all women's OT program, the women's division?
Women's section
of
the OT program. We have at Truro, we have 3 OT. We have Truro Long Island campus, we have Truro Manhattan campus, and then we have the all women's section of the OT program, which is the third. It's not a program; it's a section. We are, our program is pretty new. We started out last September. We are an all women's program, all women's section, and we have a great group of girls. They come back from seminary. They're excited to go into occupational therapy. They start pretty much right away when they get home, and then it's a pretty quick path for them. We sort of ease their way into the field. They get a bachelor's and a master's degree in under 3 years, and we have good mentors like myself, great professors, a supportive university that guides them through the program and then into the field. We have experiences like their internships experiences, their level 1 and level 2 experiences that are made for their specific needs and sensitivities, looking at their needs and sensitivities and placing them in sites that will be sensitive to their needs. And it's just a very supportive environment for them. It's I went to Truro in Bayshore, and I used to drive an hour and a half each way, and I think about how did I do that? And now it is just revamped and so tailor-made for this group of women that it's wonderful, and I'm so glad that I can be part of it.
That's fantastic. That's beautiful. In closing, if you had to give yourself advice right as you were out of school, would you change anything? Would you give yourself any specific advice that can perhaps, create a different path for yourself in the therapy world? Would you do anything different? Is there any advice you would give to the other, viewers and audience, students or people that are, on the fence, not sure which field to choose?
So I would say that I would tell myself that OT can look very different for every person that is in OT, and it does look different for every OT. We graduate school and we think about like, okay, my career has to look like this. It
Right.
doesn't. There are so many options. Build your own career based on you. Think about you. What do you like? What don't you like? You work in the field a little bit. You like certain areas of practice. You don't enjoy other areas. Create your career that matches your purpose, your needs, your passion. It doesn't need to match to anyone else's, right? It's yours.
Right.
It's yours specifically. And also another thing is surround yourself with colleagues that are supportive. So important. I've worked at places where it was toxic. It was a toxic environment. Your colleagues were not supportive. They may be judgmental or all these things. You want to have a group of colleagues that are supportive, non-judgmental, honest, caring, collaborative, and that is really important. So do your research before you accept your first job. Go and see the facility, see the people that work there, speak to others that work there, get a sense before you jump right into it.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for making the time to see us and do this interview.
It's my
Fantastic.
pleasure.
Thank you. Amazing. Beautiful.